Hey guys, Sue's here, back with another keto dinner recipes, low carb meals for you. If you're new here, we make these videos every single week to give you a little inspiration to get in the kitchen and get your keto cooking on. If you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button and join the crew. Let's get into it. First up this week, we made these awesome low-carb taco cups. These were so delicious. So to start with, I took a pound of ground beef, and I'm using my handy-dandy meat chopper upper. I always have linked in the description box or in my Amazon store. Breaking that meat apart, and when it's almost all the way brown, we're just going to add taco seasoning. Now you can add whichever low-carb taco seasoning you like. I'm adding my usual suspects: onion powder, garlic powder, oregano, paprika, chili powder, cumin, a little bit of cayenne, a little bit of red pepper flakes, salt, pepper. I think that's it. You get the gist. Add whichever you like, and then we're going to continue browning that until it's cooked all the way through, and then we're going to just stick this to the side and get started on our taco cups. So over in a separate medium mixing bowl, I am adding 4.5 tablespoons of butter that I melted on the stovetop and then just let cool slightly. You can kind of see here in the bowl the kind of texture we're going for. To that, I'm adding 4 large eggs, 1/4 teaspoon of sea salt, and then I added 1 ounce of softened cream cheese, and I'm just going to get in there with a whisk, break those egg yolks apart, and try to go ahead and get this blended together as nicely as I can. Once I do, I'm adding 1/3 cup coconut flour to that, as well as 1/4 teaspoon baking powder and 1/2 teaspoon garlic powder. And then I'm just going to use this little pastry dough cutter to kind of mix all of that in there, just because it's easy and I have it. I will try to look for a link for this as well, but a fork or a whisk would work really great here. Now, once I had that all mixed in, on the original recipe for this, which I'll link in the description box, she has listed in the ingredients 1 1/3 cup of shredded cheddar, and she doesn't have it as being separated. So I added all of that to the dough, but then later on in the recipe, she does tell you to top each of them with a little bit of cheese, but I wasn't sure which way she wanted to do it, so I went ahead and put the full 1/4 cup, mixing that all in, and it worked out wonderfully. And then I just added some extra cheese at the end because I'm always good with more cheese. Now, once I have that all mixed together, I am using silicone muffin pans for this recipe. I'm better safe than sorry, and spraying them with a little bit of olive oil cooking spray, and I just have both of them stacked beside each other on top of a baking sheet, and I am going to divide that dough evenly amongst all of the cups, spraying a little of that olive oil spray on my hands. I'm just going to go in, and I was doing it with my fingertips to start with, but it was actually just easier to use the back of my hand, and we're just trying to shape that dough into almost like a little cup. It ended up being more like a biscuit on the bottom of taco meat, but well, you can't really go wrong with biscuits either, so it all turned out well. Once I have those all set, I'm baking these for 8 minutes at 400 degrees. Here they are out of the oven. Now, if yours rise up a little bit, you can just pop them back down, but I'm just going to evenly distribute all of the taco filling amongst them. And I did use my little Instant Pot ladle for this as well. I'm finding all kinds of uses for that lately. And I'm also using it to kind of mash the meat down into those little dough cups, just to keep them all together better. And then I am topping each of those with that tablespoon of cheddar cheese that I mentioned. And she said to bake them for 5. I put them back into a 400 degree oven for 10 minutes. Here they are all done. They don't look very appetizing here yet because we haven't put toppings on them. I just used a spoon to kind of scoop them out, and some biscuits were harmed in the process, but all in all, look at these plated up. They turned out beautifully. Topped them with a little sour cream, just a couple little pieces of chopped up tomato, 2 slices of jalapeno, and a little dried cilantro. These were excellent, and they store really well in the refrigerator and heat up for a quick and easy keto lunch all week long. Next up, this looks beautiful, but it is a pumpkin lasagna with spinach. My husband picked out this recipe and wanted to try it because he's all about pumpkin spice and fall. It actually wasn't bad, but I was really skeptical. So to start with, in a large mixing bowl, 2 large eggs, 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese, 2 teaspoons Italian seasoning. I would do that in half next time. 1 teaspoon of sea salt, a teaspoon garlic powder. I am just whisking this all together really well. To that, I'm adding 2 pounds of ground beef, and then I'm getting in there with my hands, and we're just going to squish this all together until everything is nice and combined. This is actually what we're going to make our fake lasagna noodles out of. It's like the meat and the noodles, to give it stability all in one. So for that, they recommend using a standard jelly roll pan. I don't have one of those, so I am using a half sheet, which is larger than a standard jelly roll pan, but I think it worked even better for this recipe. Dumping my ground meat mixture out on top of it, and we are just going to flatten and squish this all the way to the very edges as far as we can go, because it is going to shrink some in the oven. Once I have it it flat, I'm popping it into a 450 degree oven for 20 minutes. Meanwhile, while that is cooking in a large pot over medium-high heat, I'm adding a couple tablespoons of olive oil, and then I'm adding, they said 6 cups of baby spinach, and that's really hard to measure. I wish that the recipe would have gone by ounces, but I'm gonna tell you I added 5 ounces of baby spinach. We're just gonna toss this around until it gets nice and wilted. Nothing insanely mushed up, but wilted enough that we can use it in our recipe. And I actually prefer doing this over trying to cook frozen spinach and then squeezing liquid out of it. So I might be going fresh spinach all the way in the future. After we get that done, we're just going to stick it to the side once it gets to that texture we like. And over in another medium bowl, I'm adding a can of Libby's pumpkin. Make sure if you make this recipe that you do use just straight 100% pumpkin puree with no other ingredients. Definitely don't want to accidentally put the pie filling in there. To that, I'm adding a cup and a half of almond milk. And then we're adding 2 teaspoons of dried rubbed sage. I would definitely cut that in half next time. 1 whole teaspoon of salt. I was skeptical about adding that, but it worked out fine because all of that raw pumpkin really needed it. And a half a teaspoon of ground black pepper, as well as just a dash of ground nutmeg. And I'm getting in there with my whisk and mixing this all together until it is like so, a nice pumpkin sauce. Now taking my meat out of the oven, you can see how much it shrunk up. And that would vary too, depending on the fat content probably of the meat that you were using. I went ahead and poured the excess grease off of it, and I'm using a pizza cutter. I'm gonna cut this in half, and then I'm gonna cut it lengthwise so that I have 6 rectangles, which will give me 2 layers of like meat noodles, so to speak, for our lasagna. All right, this is reminding me of cafeteria pizza. All right, sticking that to the side, taking a 9x13 baking dish, and I'm just going to add half a cup of that pumpkin sauce to the bottom of it, spread it around, adding 1 layer of my meat, and you can see how that works out pretty well to be like noodles. Then we're gonna add half of our remaining pumpkin sauce, so to speak, to the top of that, kind of smooth it out, adding half of our spinach, adding 1 cup of ricotta cheese. Make sure you are extra careful in checking your carbs because some ricotta has hardly any carbs and some is an insane amount of carbs. So get the lowest carb one possible. And we're just going to plunk that on there and smooth it out the best we can. And honestly, I didn't even try to make this look perfect because I didn't expect this recipe to turn out well because I've never made anything like this in my life. For me, pumpkin goes in dessert. Topped that with a cup of shredded mozzarella cheese and a half a cup of shredded parm. And then we're just going to repeat this process by adding the other half of our meat, the other half of our sauce, the rest of our spinach, another cup of ricotta, another cup of shredded mozzarella, and another half cup of shredded Parmesan cheese. And then to cook this, we're lowering our oven temp to 375, covering this with foil, cooking it for 35 minutes. And then I took the foil off and baked it for another 10 minutes. And here it is out of the oven. I do wish I'd have left it in a little longer to get my cheese a little browner on top, but all in all, it's beautiful and it made the house smell absolutely incredible. And here it is all plated up. I did make my husband eat this entire plate of this before I would even try it because I was so skeptical. But y'all, this was actually really good. Again, I would cut the Italian seasoning that is in the meat in half, and I would cut the sage in half because I just felt that was a little overpowering, but the salt worked out perfectly in this. It's not a recipe that I would probably make again, but to change things up, it was definitely a good one to try for the fall. Now, my favorite keto recipe of the week. Oh my goodness, this Instant Pot salmon tikka masala. I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly. So to start with, in a medium dish, and I used a stainless steel one and one that would fit into my Instant Pot. I added a tablespoon of lemon juice. They said use fresh. I used concentrate. A tablespoon of grated ginger, a tablespoon minced garlic. We're adding 1 tablespoon Kashmiri red chili powder. I will try to link it for you. A teaspoon of garam masala. You've seen me cook with that before. A half a teaspoon of ground turmeric. A teaspoon of coarse kosher salt. And then I'm just taking my whisk, mixing it together to make like a paste. I have here 1.5 pounds of salmon fillets, and we just cut them into 8 chunks. I'm adding those to our marinade rub and just making sure they're all fully coated, rubbing that in. And we're actually going to steam our fish in this, so we're just going to set that to the side. Now in our Instant Pot on the saute function, I added about a tablespoon of avocado oil, and then I'm adding some chopped up onion. Now the original recipe linked down below added 1.5 cups of onion. I decreased that to 1/2 cup, mixing that around a little, adding a teaspoon of kosher salt to that. And I'm going to cook this until our onion starts to get a little translucent, but because the Instant Pot's really going to take care of finishing cooking that, I'm not real particular about it. Adding another teaspoon of grated ginger, a teaspoon of minced garlic, cooking this about a minute more until it's nice and fragrant. Now to this, we are gonna add, I used tomato sauce and I made sure that it was just straight tomatoes. I am adding 1.5 cups of that, but I think you could really safely decrease it to 1 cup if you wanna cut even more carbs there, but I was fine just decreasing the onion for this recipe. Now mixing that together, we're gonna add some seasonings to this. Another teaspoon of that Kashmiri chili powder, 1/2 teaspoon turmeric, 1/2 teaspoon garam masala, and then we're gonna mix that in as well. And I did go ahead and cut off my Instant Pot at this point, adding 1/3 cup of water. And once I get that fully mixed, I'm gonna take the steam rack that I think came with the Instant Pot and just plop it in there. I'm sure I didn't do that correctly, but I just needed enough height to then stick my bowl of salmon right on top of this. Now, if you don't have a stainless steel bowl for your Instant Pot, I think I read online that you could use tempered glass. Comment down below if you've ever used tempered glass in your Instant Pot. To me, it seemed too dangerous. Popping the lid on this, I'm gonna cook it on high pressure for 4 minutes. We're gonna do a quick release, and since I'm filming, I just put a dish towel over that, and you can't see, but I am using my spoon from a distance to get that steam out of there. And once I did, we're gonna take that off and then also reach with the spoon to make sure it's fully good to go. And removing that lid, look how beautifully that steamed our fish. I'm excited to use that process with other meals. Now I'm using some tongs to just pull that fish out, stick it over here on a trivet, and then I'm also gonna use my tongs to get out that scalding hot steam rack. Plopping that in the sink, and then I am adding 3/4 cup of heavy cream, and we're just gonna mix this in. And now for the secret ingredients, they called for 1 tablespoon of dried fenugreek leaves, and I'm probably hacking the pronunciation of that. I didn't have any of that. I started to skip it, but I had these capsules in the cabinet from when I was breastfeeding and taking them as a supplement. I emptied some of those to get 1/2 tablespoon since it's so dried and condensed. And as soon as I opened the first one, I could tell that this was the scent that I would associate with like authentic Indian food. So if you can get your hands on fenugreek, I would highly recommend not skipping this part, but you just add it at the end and stir it in. And then you're just gonna gently place all of your steamed salmon into your sauce. And I'm just flipping those to make sure it's fully coated. I am gonna go ahead and cut this back on saute and bring it up to temp just for a couple minutes to get our fish back all the way hot throughout. And while this was finishing, I steamed some plain cauliflower rice in the microwave. And here it is plated up just on top of that. I didn't add any additional salt or butter or anything to the cauliflower rice, just topped it with a couple pieces of the salmon fillets with this curry sauce. And oh my gosh, this was so good. I will be making this recipe constantly, and I can't wait to try it with other meats, and I can't wait to try this technique in general of steaming your fish that way in the Instant Pot with some other recipes. I definitely recommend trying this. Keto, Tikka, Masala, so good. So good. Last up this week, we have this super quick and easy broccoli and goat cheese soup. I will link the original recipe down below. I did change it. So in a large pot over medium-high heat, I added 3 cups of low-sodium chicken broth, 1/2 cup of heavy cream, and 8 ounces of broccoli florets. These are like somewhere in between frozen and thawed. Now she calls for 10 ounces of goat cheese. I only had a 4-ounce pack in the fridge, and sometimes the flavor of goat cheese to me can be really overpowering. So I was cool with just adding 4 ounces of it, and to replace the texture that would have needed in the soup, I added 4 or 5 ounces of softened cream cheese. And I'm just gonna whisk this together until it starts melting and gets nice and combined. And then I'm just gonna bring it up to a boil and then turn it down and let it simmer about 15 minutes. After it's done simmering, I'm adding a teaspoon of salt because that is what the recipe called for, and because I used a low sodium broth. Now, if you used regular broth, you probably wanna decrease your salt on this. And I'm just mixing that in really well before pulling out my old thrift store blender. And I am pouring this hot soup mixture in there. Now, I usually stay away from soups that call for me to pour boiling hot soup into a blender after I've cooked it, but I went ahead and did it for this one, and I'm just gonna puree this until all of that broccoli is chopped up. You could use an immersion blender for it as well. This is what it looks like. And then you're just gonna pour and serve. I topped it with a tiny bit of parsley for color and some slivered almonds. This was super quick, as you can see, like the quickest recipe in the world, and you could totally replace that goat cheese with something else if you didn't want to use that at all. Next time, I'll probably add some bacon and some grilled chicken because that just sounds so much better than plain broccoli soup, but it was a quick meal to finish out the week, and I've been wanting to add some more soups and things in as we get into that season. So there you go. That is our keto dinner recipes for the week. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. It means a lot to us, and share this video out with your friends. The more eyes on it, the more motivated we are to keep making them. While you're at it, I will link right here on this end card here a keto salted caramel chocolate muffin recipe that I just put up this week. And until next time, bye guys.